Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Vikings Season 4, Episode 1, A Good Treason. This video is the first in a series of videos where I review episodes of Vikings. I'll have to give a spoiler warning for everything up to Season 4, Episode 1 of Vikings. If you haven't seen up to this episode, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise things will be spoiled for you. So this episode takes off right where we left off in Season 3 with Ragnar and the Vikings returning home. So I wasn't the biggest fan of Season 3. I liked it fine, but wasn't blown away by it. I mentioned in another video that I was actually more interested in the England storyline than I was the Paris storyline, which to me seemed to drag on a bit. But I was hoping that Season 4 would justify some of the things that we saw in Season 3, but we'll see. It's too early to tell from just this one episode. So we don't see any England in this episode, and we only get a few Paris scenes. Most of the episode takes place back home. So we begin with Ragnar's life still hanging in the balance, which is different than what I remembered, as I thought Ragnar was just faking his illness, but I guess, not really. He was ill, but he faked his death last season. So we see his dream where he sees the gates of Valhalla, but they close for him. And so he lives, and he kind of regrets it and would rather go to Valhalla. While he's out, though, Bjorn, who apparently is ruling in his stead, arrests Floki for the murder of Agistan. Personally, I really was disappointed that they killed off Agistan last season. He was one of my favorite characters, and I feel the show really loses something by not having him around because he kind of straggled the line between England and the Vikings and brought an interesting dynamic which might be missing now. So I have mixed feelings about them arresting Floki, because on one hand I'm glad they arrested him because he should be held accountable for killing Agistan. It would have irritated me if they just simply let him get away with it. But on the other hand, Floki is a really interesting character as well, and the show would really lose something if they killed him off. So I'm glad he's getting punished, but I hope they don't kill him off altogether. And for what I've seen in this episode, I don't think they will. Because when Ragnar woke up, he didn't seem happy with Bjorn's decision to arrest him, but because he, did, he now had to stick with it. And I'm not quite sure what Ragnar is going to do with Floki. I have no idea what that little circle he drew around him meant. I do believe Floki when he said that he killed Agistan because he thought it's what the gods wanted. So I think it's likely that Ragnar will let him live and call him friend again eventually, but I think first he has to sort of fuck with his head the way that Ragnar loves to do. And, and also show him who's boss, and, so he knows not to do any shit like that ever again. The other interesting thing about Bjorn is that it seemed he was a bit pissed off with Ragnar that he dismissed his decision so easily, and I think this had something to do with his decision to leave. So to paraphrase from the latest episode of Better Call Saul, Bjorn has decided to walk the earth like Jules at the end of Pulp Fiction. Well, it's probably more equatable to like a walkabout or something like that, where Bjorn goes into the wild to find who he is and partly to prove himself. Because I do think a big part of why he decided to do this is because he doesn't think Ragnar believes in him, and he needs to prove himself that he can handle himself. And when Ragnar said, "Prove me wrong," this seemed to piss him off because Ragnar was kind of acknowledging that he didn't think that he could do it. However, those were words of encouragement that he wanted to be proven wrong. But what will happen to Bjorn is still up in the air, and I think it could go either way because of what Aslog said to Ragnar about how this could be the last time he sees him. And I really like Ragnar's reaction, by the way, because, they don't seem to really do stuff like this in TV shows. Typically, like when someone says something weird like that, they usually just go with it. But I loved Ragnar's reaction where he was just like, why the hell would you say that? Personally, I hope they don't kill Bjorn off because I quite like that character, but we'll see. So we also get a storyline with Lagerthar and her little town, as while they were away in Paris, Kaif and Lagerthar found a bond. While they had originally left as enemies when Kaif stole her leadership, but Kaif actually seemed like a pretty smart guy because he could recognize how formidable Lagerthar is, and it's better to have her as an ally than an enemy. But this pisses off that dude that he had originally conspired with, Einar, who is, if I recall, was once Lagerthar's husband, and he used to abuse her. So Kaif makes Lagerthar an equal, which pisses off Einar, so he threatens him and tells him to get rid of her. So he appears to oblige him, but what he's really doing is getting everyone who wants to get rid of her to stand together so he can kill them all. And Lagerthar then cuts his fucking nuts off. It was just brutal. So King Horik's son is a little wild card because at first he seemed to be on Einar's side, but then he's one of the archer who kills Einar and all his allies, so obviously he's on Kaif and Lagerthar's side, which is quite interesting indeed because in the past he seemed to be conspiring against Ragnar, but now it appears he's completely on his side, which I think is really quite interesting. So Kaif mentions specifically that he and Lagerthar aren't married, but I think that might actually happen. So, especially after what he just did. In fact, I think he might have done this as a means to woo her, and I think it might very well work. So that's Vikings for you. In order to propose to a woman you have a thing for, you kill a bunch of people and let your crush cut this guy's nuts off. Nice. So as I mentioned earlier, we get a few Paris scenes, and as was mentioned in the finale last year, the Franks promised to marry their princess off to Rollo in order to get him to fight on their side against Ragnar and the other Vikings. And surprisingly, he goes along with it when it's beyond obvious she doesn't want to marry him. However, one thing we learned on their wedding night is Rollo is closer to Tyrion than he is to Ramsay because he doesn't force himself on the princess, who is obviously completely unwilling. But he has a kind of light attitude about it, and when she pulls a knife on him, he's just like, oh, that tickles. I suppose he knew that she wouldn't kill him, otherwise, she'd be in a lot of shit. So then we find out half of the Vikings in Rollo's group are really unhappy with this arrangement, and they don't want to ally with the Franks. So Rollo's just like, oh, don't worry, I'll talk to them. But when he shows up to talk to them, he leads the Franks there that ambush and kill everyone. And to be perfectly honest, this is what really pissed me off about this episode, because we've seen this so many times before, that Rollo betraying Ragnar or the other Vikings. Yeah, sure, we kind of knew they were going this way at the end of last season, when he seemed to be making an alliance with Paris, but this cements it. And also, it's like this isn't the first time we've seen Vikings who settle in another country get slaughtered. It seems like they should be settling in other countries because they'll just get killed off. Now, I know there's some theories out there that Rollo is just playing with the Franks and he killed off all the other Vikings just to fool the Franks that he's on their side when really he isn't. But I doubt it. Either way, I'm so sick of this Rollo betraying Ragnar storyline. They keep doing it over and over again. He can trust him, then he can't trust him, then he can trust him again, and he can't trust him. Come on, this is just getting really repetitive. But of course, I will keep tuning in to see where they go from here. So my big question is, will they do another big time jump? Because this is something I think Vikings was really good at jumping a long way ahead in time and making it work. It's the only show I know that actually pulls this off really well. And I think it's possible we could get another big time jump, what with Bjorn going on his walkabout, and Rollo and his new marriage, and Lagerthar and her budding relationship with Cave. I think at the very least they could jump forward a year, which they actually do quite a bit. But I think it's possible they could even do several years, but I don't know, we'll see. The one thing that makes me doubt that is the Floki storyline, as it seems like a situation that kind of needs to be resolved sooner rather than later, but we'll see. So my rating for A Good Treason is a 6 good. There was a lot of interesting developments here. Floki getting arrested, Bjorn going in the spirit walk, Lagerthar cutting that guy's nuts off. However, the thing with Rollo really bothered me. It just seems like a repeated storyline and reminds me of what I don't like about The Walking Dead, on how that show just seems to be going on and on and on forever and will just repeat the same plot lines over and over again. But it was overall a good episode that piqued my interest, and I can't wait to see where they take it from here. So that's it for my review of A Good Treason. Be sure to check back here every week as I review episodes of the Vikings. And be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on shows like Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, Star Trek, Better Call Saul, and many more. And make sure you subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.